But Lincoln had not seen Booth coming. He had not moved suddenly to avoid being shot. Instead, just as Booth was about to fire, Lincoln leaned forward and to the left to look down into the audience on the main floor. James Ferguson saw it all. The president, at the time he was shot, was sitting in this position. He was leaning his hand on the rail and was looking down at a person in the theater, not looking on the stage. He had the flag that decorated the box pulled around, and he was looking between the post and the flag. The pistol, a fine, expensive weapon, had functioned perfectly. The trigger freed the cocked hammer from its tension spring. The hammer snapped forward, striking the copper percussion cap resting over the hollow steel nipple mounted on the barrel. The resulting spark flashed into the chamber, igniting the load of black powder. The explosion propelled the .44 caliber ball at a muzzle velocity slow by modern standards, but fast enough. Still, Booth had almost missed. If the president had leaned forward a little more, the bullet might have whistled just over his head. Instead, it struck him in the head, on the lower left side, a little below the ear. The ball ripped through his chestnut-colored hair, cut the skin, perforated the skull, and because of the angle of Lincoln's head at the moment of impact, drove a diagonal tunnel through Lincoln's brain from left to right. The wet brain matter slowed the ball's velocity, absorbing enough of its energy to prevent it from penetrating the other side of the skull and exiting through the president's face. The ball came to rest in Lincoln's brain, lodged behind his right eye. Lincoln never knew what happened to him. His head dropped forward until his chin hit his chest, and his body lost all muscular control and sagged against the richly upholstered rocking chair. He did not fall to the floor. He looked as though he was bored with the play and had fallen asleep. It happened so fast that Lincoln lost consciousness before he heard the report of the pistol, smelled the burnt gunpowder, or was enveloped by the voluminous cloud of blue-gray smoke, the signature of all black powder weapons. The sound of the pistol, more like the hollow poof of fireworks than the hard cracking of a modern firearm, another characteristic of 19th-century black powder weapons with low muzzle velocities, echoed and hung in the box for several seconds. Then it traveled to the ceiling, the stage below, and reverberated throughout the theater. Nobody moved. The president, Mary Lincoln, Clara Harris, Major Rathbone, and Booth remained perfectly still, as though posed in the studio for one of Alexander Gardner's wet-plate albumin photographs that required a motionless exposure of several seconds. Time stopped. The pistol's report did startle a number of people in the audience. Some thought it was part of the play, others an unscripted surprise in honor of the president's visit. Some people didn't hear it at all. Rathbone, an experienced Army officer who had heard gunfire before, was the first to realize that something was amiss. He turned to his left. The smoke, now tinted red from the gaslights, and the crimson upholstery and wallpaper that combined to give the box a fiery, devilish glow, partly obscured his vision. Rathbone rose from his seat, stepping in the direction of the president. At that instant he saw a wild-eyed man, his face pale and ghostly against his black clothes, hair, and mustache. Like a demon, Booth emerged from the black powder haze and sprang at him. Simultaneously, Rathbone lunged for Booth, grabbing him by the coat. The assassin broke free, shouting but one word, "Freedom," and thrust his right arm up as high as he could reach. Rathbone's eyes were drawn up by the gesture, and he saw what Booth clenched tightly in his fist. A big, shiny knife, its menacing blade pointed directly down at him. Booth moved too quickly for Rathbone to read the patriotic slogans acid-etched into the blade. Land of the free, home of the brave, liberty, independence. Booth was not going to try to fend off Rathbone with a few puny forward jabs of the knife. Instead, he sought the death blow. He was going to deliver an arcing theatrical swing pivoting from his shoulder that would drive the blade through Rathbone's ribs and into his heart. Booth's arm was already in motion, and at that last moment Rathbone raised his arm to parry Booth's strike. The Major grunted in pain. His reflexive, lightning-fast defensive maneuver saved his life, but the assassin's blade sliced through his coat sleeve and into his upper arm. Blood gushed from the long, deep wound. Booth had no more time to waste on finishing off Rathbone. The clock in his head was still ticking down. If he was going to escape the theater, he had to get out of the box at once. He turned to the balustrade and swung one leg over the side. By now some members of the audience had looked up. Was that a man climbing out of the president's box, preparing to leap to the stage? As Booth positioned for his leap, Rathbone came at him again, grabbing at his coat-tail. Distracted, Booth got tangled in the framed portrait of George Washington hanging from the front of the box, and one of his riding spurs snagged one of the flags that just a few hours before Henry Clay Ford had cradled in his arms when he ran into Booth on the street. Still, he managed to free himself and imperfectly leapt forward to the stage. It was the revenge of Old Glory, soon went the popular myth. Still he managed to free himself and imperfectly leapt forward to the stage. Booth hit the stage unevenly, but still on his feet. He knew something was wrong. He could feel it in his left leg, near the ankle, but there was nothing he could do about it now. Booth clambered to center stage, turned to the audience, and rose erect to his full height. His splendid chest had always made him appear taller than he was. Every second was precious to his escape, but he had rehearsed this part too well to forsake it now. He knew that this was his last performance on the American stage, and for this he would be remembered for eternity. He must not blow his lines. All eyes were upon him. He stood motionless, paused momentarily for dramatic effect, and thrust his bloody dagger triumphantly into the air. The gas footlights danced on the shiny blade now speckled with red, and exaggerated his wild countenance. "Sic semper tyrannis," he thundered. "Thus always to tyrants." It was the state motto of Virginia. Then Booth shouted, "The South is avenged."